I'm going to begin with Seaton, which is a hamlet by the sea, which I love to go to with my daughter, usually in the spring or the autumn when it isn't packed. And it has the River Seaton flowing in through the beach, and a beach cafe and a pub, and you can walk along to Downderry, which is one of my favourite places. And in the bay at Seaton swims the Seaton mermaid. And so long ago, Seaton was a prosperous port, and her shout went out, and the pilchards were in the bay. And so the Seine was formed, and the 3 boats sailed out into the bay. And the fisherman was busy in his boat, but he wasn't too busy because he caught the eye of the mermaid. And she was pretty as sunlit seas, and Paul was instantly smitten. And he chatted with her and talked with her all afternoon while he was fishing. And then he was busy about his boat, and he wasn't really concentrating on what he was doing. He was thinking only of the mermaid. And then he saw all the pilchards in his nets, and he felt that his net seemed really much heavier than ever before, and he was very puzzled. And then he saw, to his horror, a huge tail in his net, much bigger than any of the others, and he realized with horror that he had caught the mermaid. Now the mermaid was not happy with him any longer. She screamed in rage, and he said, "I'll let you free, I'll let you free." But he was too late, and the mermaid conjured a huge sandstorm and threw it over Seaton. And although today the sand has been taken off Seaton, it has returned because only 2 years ago the sand was thrown on Seaton Beach, and it heaped all along the beach, and it destroyed the beach cafe. So someone, and we don't know who, had upset the mermaid again. So that's the story of Seaton. And I'm going to take you on to another water story. This is the story up on Bodmin above St Neot, and it's the story of Dosemary Pool. And I'm going to read you a little bit from my first book of the place writing, and then the story of the old storm woman. So, across the moor from Minions in the parish of St Neot is Dosemary Pool. Dosemary Pool is a friendly place, high on the moor, yet not desolate, the kind of place to have a helpful, serene being, the Lady of the Lake of King Arthur's tales. The ground around the pool is peat bog and marshland with reeds and ducks and golden gorse. It is not a lake to walk around easily. Dosemary is wild wetland. Light reflects off the water, and the strong moorland wind makes many waves. On a stormy night, the voice of Tregeagle carries on the wind. It is the spirit of the wind I'm going to tell in this old tale of the old woman who creates the winds of the world beneath Dosemary Pool. High on the moorland lives Dosemary Pool, a drop in the sea, a place said to be the source of wind. Beneath it surfaced the old storm woman, an incredibly old woman, older than your great-great-granny, concocts a wind especially for each new day. She stirs it deep beneath the waves with her huge weather stirrer. Small strokes to begin, increasing until she has conjured a whirlpool in the centre of the pool. When it is ready and moving well, the old woman screws up her terribly old face until every wrinkle is deep as a ditch, and blows. The water fights, swirling and bursting with the force of the wind, and with a rush the new wind rises up from the depths of the lake and through the vortex of the whirlpool to fill the moorland skies. And I'm going to stay on the moors. And one of the things I love most about Cornish folklore is the giants. And Cornwall was once a land of giants. Huge, gangling, rock-throwing giants roamed the land, stretching their legs from one coast to the other. The giants' absolute favourite was granite, the silver lichen-covered rock strewn across the cliffs and moors. Why are granite boulders laying loose all over Cornwall? Because the giant threw them there. Giants love rock-throwing contests and games like playing quoits and bob buttons. And I'm going to tell you a tale of the giants of the cheese ring. So the cheese ring, some say, was created by weathering, and some say was created by giants. And the giants had been having a bit of a problem with the saints, and they had gathered on the moors to have a discussion about what they could do about the saints and how they could rid Cornwall of the saints. And they were all roaring and laughing on the moors when they saw a little tiny saint clambering up towards them. "I will challenge you to a contest," he said. And the biggest giant, Uther, was really surprised, and he laughed and he said, "What kind of contest?" And tiny St. Cheese said, I will challenge you to a duel of strength." And the giant thought this was hilarious, and he was happy to take on the challenge. And the tiny saint said, "And I will, if you win, then the saints will leave Cornwall. But if I win, then the giants will have to leave." And so tiny St. Chew lifted the first rock, and he felt somehow a great strength come through him, and he threw it, and he managed to throw it onto Stowe's Hill. And then the giant, Uther, picked up a huge rock, and he threw it easily, and they continued until there were 2 rocks left. And the giant lifted one, and he was quite tired. He'd been throwing rocks all day, and he just managed to lift it, and he threw it towards Stowe's Hill, and it rolled down, and he was devastated, but he knew that the final rock was so big and the saint so tiny that he'd never managed to lift it. So the saint then looked at the rock, and he knew that he'd lost. But from behind the hill came an angel, and who lifted the rock and took it on top of the pile. And so the saint had won. And the giants were banished from Cornwall. But the thing about that story is some people think that the saint cheated, and some people think, like me, are on the side of the giants in some ways. So that's the story of the one giant story. And the mermaids are the guardians of the sea, and the piskies are the guardians of the moor. So the piskies are the little people, little invisible people who ride on the ponies, on the wild ponies, and they tie little stirrups in their manes and in their tails and ride across Rotor. And if the mist comes down and the fog comes down, then you have to turn your pockets inside out and your hat inside out and your coat inside out, so that you won't be lost forever in the marsh, and you'll be able to find your way out and find your way home. But the other thing about the piskies is that they make their beds in the peat bogs, and they're very careful about their beds, and they don't like anyone to interfere with their beds. And one day, Grandfer came, and he decided to dig the best peat bog on the moor because he wanted to keep his family warm. And he dug it all up all day, and he took it home, and he built a big fire. But what he didn't know was it was the piskies' bed. And that day, the granny and Jennifer, his granddaughter, were baking biscuits for his birthday, and they left them out in the spence overnight. And the piskies came when it was very dark, and they were very angry with Grandfer for taking their beds. And they came and they ate all Grandfer's birthday biscuits. And then the next day, Granny was very cross with Jennifer because she thought she'd eaten all her biscuits. So, and Jennifer was very adamant that she hadn't eaten any of the biscuits. It must have been the piskies. So Granny and Jennifer cooked lots more biscuits, and this time Granny looked out round the door and just checked to see if Jennifer was eating the biscuits. But she wasn't eating the biscuits, it was the piskies who came, and Granny chased them away. And the thing about that story is that the piskies are very helpful, and they often help people in their houses. But if you annoy them or upset them, then they can be vengeful and mischievous. So yeah, thank you.